Give me the nod. Hello, and welcome to this week's Grief the Week. I'm Mona Duncan, and I'm here with my co-host, Jan Moray. And today our topic is, can choice theory solve the world's problems? And this was a request made by one of our followers and frequent contributors to being here and to being with us. And then Jan wrote up the little, what we would be talking about to kind of go with it. And she said, so what would negotiations look like if everyone knew choice theory? How could different political parties, religions, and ethnic groups relate better with each other? Would choice theory work with countries who have been disputing with each other for centuries? Well, Jan, what do you think? You want to start us off?
It sure would be nice if everybody knew choice theory and knew about providing information and being respectful and using the connecting habits and all the concepts that we know from choice theory. But it's not, we're not there yet. And and I was thinking when I was first writing this out, I was thinking about the solving circle. But then last week on Making Sense of It, and for those of you who don't know about that broadcast, it's done on Wednesdays, and Mona is the moderator for that. The guest, Lucy Billings Robbins, was talking about the solving circle only works if people are committed to the relationship. Because for those people who don't understand the solving circle, you have it's used with couples where you have the two couples, normally a male and a female, but it can be same-sex couples, and then the relationship is another entity in that solving circle, and so you do things that are best for the couple and best for the relationship. And so my first thought was, okay, we can do that with countries too, and to think, okay, let's do what's best for our relationship. But not everybody is committed to having a relationship with that other person. They may not want to. So I had to kind of backtrack a little bit and say, okay, so, but I still think that all the concepts of choice theory could work if people really did believe them and practice them and knew that, I'm just providing this person information, and just because this person disagrees with me, I don't have to go to the disconnecting habits and start calling them names and saying how, and attacking their character and stuff like that. And so how do we get that trend started, and how do we get people to act that way and to learn how to communicate better and more in a way so that we're willing to work with each other and willing to solve these problems?
Well, to me, it's like I was saying at the very beginning before we went on air, is the fact that everything we do really is a choice, but we don't let ourselves know that we're making a choice. And so, and we look at the feedback, and if we don't like the feedback, we blame the other person. And so as we can begin to look at the facts and kind of take it to teach it or to speak it into existence or to suggest it, but to leave it with the person in a take it or leave it manner. I know sometimes in teaching intensive trainings and talking about the fact that we are making these choices, by the end of the class, they'll be accusing one another, well, that was your choice. Well, that was your choice. Well, that was your choice, And it's in a playful mood because they're learning those concepts, and they're beginning, they've read about them to have even had an interest in the class, and begin to realize that, yeah, this really does make a lot of sense, and kind of telling one another that and so I encourage them, this, and it's okay to banter here with people that are like mine, but please don't go back to your coworkers, don't go back to your family, don't go back to your neighbors and telling them right up front, well, you're just making that choice. Because, you may suggest this is something I'm learning. Mm-hmm. And in beginning to learn that, and even working with the prisoners, that I would, tell them about choice theory, and then I would say, I give you a challenge. And for the next 24 hours, at least, maybe more than that, but at least for 24 hours, everything you do, every word you say, every bite you eat, every expression you have, after that, tell yourself, I chose to say that. I chose to eat that. I chose to go there. Because you really do choose those things, but you need to let yourself know it.
Right, right. And to get away from the, I'm doing this because I have to, somebody's making me do this. It's I am choosing to act this way or not act this way.
Right. And that's not to say that the other person is being a little angel. It's not to say that the other person is not irritating, is not aggravating, is not wrong as far as, from your point of view. But it's a live and let live. And so I was thinking, maybe just going to the axioms so that those that watch now or watch later could at least have that groundwork of what the theory is. But I know with myself personally, that theory is no longer a theory, it has become a fact.
It is. It's become a way of life. And you find yourself when you're getting away from the axioms, there's a little voice in your head that's telling you, you know what you just did? Sharon is laughing there. I think she's had that little voice in her head as well.
Been there, done that.
Sometimes we see those little devils and angels on cartoon shoulders.
Uh-huh.
Well, as we begin to practice those theories, those axioms, those 10 main thoughts of the theory, we begin to realize that, maybe I have an angel on both shoulders.
A good and a bad.
Yeah. So shall we just go there?
Well,
Sure.
could we imagine that we're applying this to the United Nations?
Well, sure.
So what
Instead
issue?
of individuals, a large group of humanity from everywhere in the world. How would choice theory be applied to the United Nations if we were trying to put it there instead of a psychologist's office in a much larger or let's say modus classes in a prison in a much larger how would I don't know, take any 2 countries or any 20 countries and have them apply choice theory, and how would that work, or could it work?
Sure.
And would it make a difference?
It's already in 21 countries, and they're all working beautifully with it.
Well, yeah, but we still have a lot of wars.
Well, yes, we do. And
Yeah.
that will probably always be, just like you'll always have the poor with you, and you will always have the warmongers with you. That's kind of the fact of life. That it's those of us that are.
Jerry, one idea I have, which is, it doesn't get down to the grassroots, but the United Nations has a grounding mission, vision, principle to it. So as the representatives from the United Nations come together at their meetings, their focal point is the entity that we represent, what does this stand for? And that becomes the bigger thing that they all strive to support versus as much of their individual focus. That might be one way. Yes, we all know mission and vision statements are only as good as they are enacted, but they are developed for a reason. And I haven't looked at the UN's in a while, but that might be one starting point. And then their commitment to enact that on behalf of the unity of nations. What does the unity of nations mean? Now, somehow then that requires additional action back at each person's country, but you posed such an excellent question. That was one initial thought I had. So,
Well, that kind of sounds like that they have a solving circle of sorts if they have these guiding principles that they under which they operate, and that's something that they are committed to follow. So.
And there's an interpreter there, so that whatever the speaker is saying is being interpreted in their particular language, that they would understand it in other words, but would still have the same meaning to it.
Yeah.
Now, if the UN, there is a head of the United Nations, if the leadership within the United Nations also helped in a authoritarian way,
Exactly.
to help support that and guide that and give, and put dialogue to it and positive action, I can't help but think it would at least further the concept and the idea, and that they practiced it amongst themselves when they came together. That can build at least the relationship amongst the UN ambassadors. So that could parallel a school board, that could parallel a state legislature, that could parallel a congregation, the group of us here that are at the Zoom, that parallel, that there's a grounding entity that brings us together. Now it goes back to what you were saying though, Jan, is you have to believe in it and want to support it. And that ebbs and flows, that it's human that's going to ebb and flow, but that you still remain committed to the core base. So those are just some thoughts.
Okay, no.
The idea of a quality world, each of us has our own personal ideas of a quality world, but would it be possible for nations to have a concept of a quality world? And I'm fairly certain that our quality world is going to be different than, you pick another country, I don't care where, but different countries have different ideas of different quality worlds.
And different people in those countries.
Can that be reconciled? Can those be reconciled in such a way to make peace, to make it work?
Well, I don't think a whole country could have a unique quality world. I don't know, Mona, you jump in here, but to me, it's like, it's hard enough with two people in a relationship. They each have their own quality world pictures that kind of directs their lives, but what they try to do is work together with them to try to keep that relationship going.
So maybe choice theory would not work on that larger scale.
But Laura, you were talking about the mission vision, those are kind of like developing the quality world for the organization.
And I do think that we have a quality world in the United States that is under challenge, but we have our vision of what democracy is in the United States. Now, of course, we have the events. Other so-called democracies have a bit of a different vision of their democracy. That is, our Constitution is our and the amendments are it's some aspect of democracy. Now, we see a lot of challenges to that, but with trying to Hope Springs Eternal, that it may be that we find a way to come together in common quality worlds when we face tremendous humanitarian issues, and that there are times like 9/11, countries came together, the world came together to support. It certainly would be nice, and I do think we're finding some ways to come together as a world with the pandemic, but the scales quickly become unbalanced. The scales become unbalanced quicker because of probably of the size and the variance of as you all were saying, are individual quality worlds as countries. But boy, it would be nice if we found more ways to come together as a world, because we've got many common things to address.
No.
In my thoughts, it's like it's going to be very difficult for us all to come together, but to acknowledge that we each have our own perception of what is going on in the world. We each have our own quality world pictures, and we've learned to accept that, and we've learned to live with it and to get along. And maybe, Mona, if you want to take us through the axioms,
Yeah.
we can see how that all comes together. Because I mean, the thought of having one quality world set of pictures that everyone's agreeing to, oof, I have a hard time believing that's going to happen.
Could it possibly be that 1,000 years from now, if there still is a civilization, that we're much closer to a common quality world that all human beings accept than
I don't
we
know,
do
I'm pretty
now?
stubborn. It's going to be hard for me to give up some of my pictures.
Or can we slide back however many years to where everybody was all in one little podcast? And
One little tribe,
because we've
like-
been given one little tribe, yeah. Because we've been
And
given,
maybe,
we all have a personality.
But are
And
we
we've been
humans
given
maybe
moving in that
free will.
direction? Are humans moving in that direction, or are we moving in the opposite direction? Are we coming together, or are we going apart? Humanity, I'm talking all humans.
Well, I personally, and for what it's worth, I think that we all want the same thing. It's just that the way we go about it is not the same way, and because someone else is using this tool instead of that tool in trying to accomplish the same thing, we see them as wrong, and then we grab our little group together that's going to join with us to see things the way we see it.
Yeah.
And we cause more problems than we can correct with those attitudes.
So Mona, how would you describe, if you're saying, and my apologies for being late, everyone, when you're describing everybody wants the same thing,
I think
is that an it? Is that everybody wants, like if we go back to what Dr. Glasser said, he said everybody wants happiness. So if everybody wants happiness, everybody wants joy, is that just because it's different? Happiness and joy is described differently by different people. So the
Could be.
overall general, or are you talking about something else that I'm not?
Well, no, I'm talking about the overall thing. I think we all want peace. I think we all want fulfillment. We all want happiness. We want joy. We want healthy relationships. But because we have that my way or my way, we often are not willing to have any give and take, to not have any give and receive, to not listen to where someone else is coming from, so that maybe, well, I had a neighbor whenever we first moved out here that I met her. We only had about 5 people in this little neighborhood whenever I moved out here. We built, or my dad built. Anyway, I met this neighbor, and she and I started going places together. And whenever it was her time to drive, we would go all the way south and take a right for several miles, and then go take another right and go north for several miles to the activity that we were going to. What I'm getting at is that over time, there was a bridge and a road put from our community to the northern community, northern Waco community. But you know what? This lady was determined that was the only way she knew to go. Well, when I drove, we went down to the new bridge, went across the river, went to the North Waco thing that we was going to. I knew that lady for years and years and years. And every time I would get real upset with her because she wouldn't do that. And that was before I even heard of William Glasser. And I finally began to realize, you know what? That's the only way she knows. So just go with it. But so often you get to the same destination, we're going to the same place. We're enjoying the same thing when we get there. And I began to enjoy the ride, even though it was much longer and it wasn't the most efficient and the most competent, but we were wanting the same thing. What one has their mind see it as being that it's this direction, that ingredient, this, and we won't give any leeway there, then we make our own problems. And the thing of it is that years later, Garland's brother came to live with us, and he became good friends with that lady's grandson. That was, and he made the comment, he said, "No, I know, Grandma still does all that." She will not go on any of the other roads.
Mm-hmm. But then that brings you to the first axiom about you couldn't control her behavior. You could only control the way you drove. And she probably felt the same way when you drove. Maybe she was afraid of going across the bridge, or
could have been,
because it was too high. I know my aunt did not like going on the expressways because she didn't like those overpasses that were really high. So there could have been something, but she couldn't control you, and you couldn't control her. But you managed to work it out together, because you did make it to the activity center. And
right. And the thing of it is, had that been her problem, even with later the bridge, I would have been amenable to going a long way. But are we willing to work together with each other? That's the whole problem. It's not, are there principles, whether it's in the United States or the United Nations or other, are we willing to work those things together? Or even in a marriage, or not only just marriage, even with your kids, are we willing to listen and hear where the other one's coming from and make some concessions as need be for the good of the whole? That doesn't mean that because they've made a really good argument that you bow down to them.
right.
It means
Right,
that you set
right.
the boundary, because there has to be a boundary here somewhere. There has to be a principle, a rule. There has to be a rule maker. There needs to be an enforcer, but it doesn't have to be harsh and cruel.
Well, how much of and again, my apologies for missing the beginning, how much of the principles is tied in with values and beliefs?
Well, a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm thinking of when Jerry's talking about, could we get quality world pictures? Are there certain values and beliefs we all have that we can then embrace that? Embrace those values and principles.
And we in reality therapy and choice theory, we have a language all our own. How many people tuning in and talking about quality world pictures hasn't turned it off because they don't have a clue what we're talking about.
Right.
And we have to speak a language of the people. We have to tell them, in a way that, or I'm speaking something that has been affected in my life, and I would like to put it out here for you to think about it and consider it. And one of those things is to kind of get along, and we can kind of get along as we begin to realize that, number one, the only person we have any control over is us. And we don't have a whole lot of control over that because there's too many rules and regulations.
Well, we can choose whether to follow them or not.
Yeah. We can choose whether to follow them, whether to follow them in a good attitude or not.
Yeah, right.
And then the second overall principle is that the only thing we can do to work with whomever it is, whether it's one-on-one or a bunch of them, is to just give some information. And we're not giving information in a viable way if everyone's speaking at once. And we're not giving information and as you give information and in talking about information, you see, you cannot give information unless there's a receptor. So it may be another axiom that we could go in there with it, or another principle in there with it, is that whenever you are giving information, you need to also be able to receive information. Or if someone is not receiving that information, then quit trying to give it.
Yes.
at that moment until there can be a reconciliation of maybe they have some information that I need to share. I know in beginning to learn to get along with a very difficult, demanding person, I learned to just quit speaking. And I'm not talking clamming up and getting huffy. I'm talking just quit speaking. And eventually they'll be, well, what was you saying? I said, well, are you going to listen?
Yeah.
And when I speak, will you listen? Are you willing to hear what I'm saying? Because you see, if we just keep on and everybody just talking, then there's no consensus to be found. And so it starts in that, you know, is all we can give is information and all we can receive is information. And we are receiving information even if we see that other person just either closing down or clamming up. I mean, there's so many, as you're talking about, the values and the principles go in there that we can read so much into something that may not be there. And we may be reading stuff in that isn't there.
You know, whenever we talk about information, I always come to the conclusion, or I always think, some information is true and some of it is false.
True.
And
True.
people that base their actions on false information, they're probably going to have destructive actions or counterproductive actions.
But how do you
And
know
so
which information is true and which information is false?
that you have to discern the difference between true and false information. There's a lot of false information going around.
There is,
Well,
but how
but
do you
then
know
the other
you're-
issue being is, yeah, Jan, we're probably going to say the same thing.
Go
Like,
ahead.
I think there's levels of misinformation. Like, is the person giving the falsehood, are they convinced that's truth?
Right.
Because it's their
Usually
truth.
They are.
But on the other hand, are there people who are spinning the truth? You know, if we want to get into it politically, are they spinning the truth for different reasons?
Yeah.
You know, so is it a lie? Is it an absolute falsehood? But again, if all behavior is purposeful, are there people who are intentionally lying, but it's just a white lie? You know, so I think it's degrees of it. And then I think it's also degrees of when we perceive it. It may be, I don't know whether I think about it from a values beliefs aspect. When my husband passed away, and what I knew was he had been a Roman Catholic. I'm Jewish, you know, and we never had children, so we didn't have to mess with that particularly. And there were some things that, you know, he would do as a Roman Catholic, and there were some things I would do as a Jew. So, okay, now when he passed away, it was like we knew he was going to die, so I had to reach out to practicing Catholics, you know, because, okay, I don't know how to do this. But it was interesting. So, for instance, the practicing Catholics who came over to the house brought their priest with them. Oh, thank you, Mona. Oh, there we are. I kind of went, oh, what happened here?
Did I?
When the priest came, Tom was very, very intent on being buried, not cremated. But when the priest said to him, no, it's been approved now, you can be cremated as long as you're buried in the ground. And then Tom went, then he was fine. But that was his person who had to tell him, okay. You know, so that was the truth of the Roman Catholic Church, even though, you know, I was kind of going, well, yeah, so. So, you know, like nobody was lying to him, but it took the priest to be able to say, this is it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
That's a good example.
Oh, this is interesting. I like this a lot, Mona.
Thank you. This is
Oh, I love this.
graphics that I put up on teaching. All we can give is another person is information. And I go hand in hand with that, that the only thing we can receive from another person is information. And even in looking at the warmongering and the abusive, even if that information that they're giving is a slap on the face or punching your eye out, all we're doing is receiving information from them or giving information to them. And so what kind of people are we working with? There's the know-it-all, there's the passives that won't speak up, that won't use their words. There's there's all these kind of people. And is that going to hinder the amount of information that's given or receiving? You better believe it. There are too many things. And then here I have the newspaper, and then I have the extra. And how do we see it? Are we seeing everything as a lie? Because that goes through our perception. Are we all hearing it as a yeah, yeah, yeah? Or how are we hearing? Or how are we willing to? And it goes back to the fact that the needs that we have those needs, those basic needs of survival and power and, giving, and nothing is more disempowering than to have someone shut you up or not hear you or not, that you don't matter. Is there anything more disempowering than that? Whether it's to your children or to whomever. And it's realizing that there are these different personality types and being amenable to them and accepting them. And accepting them.
And to understand, going back to the information thing, who's the judge of whether the information is correct or not? Because people have their reasons, they've got their data to back it up, and they're looking at the information one way, and somebody else is looking at the information a different way, and they're coming with diametrically opposed conclusions from the same bit of data. And so who is to say which is right? And so to me, it's to back off and understand that we each have our own perception, and they're going to be different. I cannot see us ever getting to the point where we're all going to agree as to what's right and what isn't. But we need to learn to accept that and to be tolerant of that other side of it, and to stay away from those disconnecting habits. And somebody brought up, I think it was you, Sue, all behavior is purposeful, really understanding and living those concepts, then you can deal with these other people, and the emotions are still going to come up. They're still going to hit a nerve, and you're going to cringe, you're going to get really upset about it. That stuff is still going to happen, but to understand that people will have different opinions and different viewpoints. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. It doesn't mean we can't get along.
Right.
And as much as we've learned with this coronavirus, we all breathe together.
Yeah.
And whether we are breathing good space or not such good space. And the thing of it is that it can attach to us, and we can infect other people and not even know it. And so it's realizing, we may be the liar there that thinks we're telling all the truth. And yet we may be the one that's spreading all the harm and all of the disconnect. And it takes some real deep soul searching, and that's part of it. And as in the topic here, it said, different political parties, religions, and ethnic groups, and to relate better. And I think that's the key word right there, is to relate better. It's not that we're not relating with everybody in the whole world. If we know anything about them, we have some kind of an opinion about them, because that's just the human nature. And everybody has an opinion, and it may be kind of okay, and it may be way off, or it may be, it's just realizing that, but we deep down inside, we want the same thing. We want cooperation. We want peace. It's just that one is going about it in trying to force it, and another is going about it in a more trying to communicate way.
And it's not to say one is better than the other, because in some situations you need to go the force route, and in other situations it's not as effective. And so there is no one answer.
Mhm.
So when is coercion okay?
Well, that's a question I have a hard time with. Because for
That's
me,
good,
it's
Nancy.
never. But I know that sometimes, I mean, like when a kid is going to put their hand on the hot stove or something, pulling their hand off. I think that's the example that you hear the most. That's because you really are helping saving that kid from getting hurt. But it's a fine line. Where do you draw the line? I don't know. I tend to want to not do coercion at all, but I will accept that maybe sometimes it's necessary.
Maybe one way is when it prevents harm.
And doesn't harm anybody
That's
else.
general, I know, but coercion's okay if you're knocking the gun out of somebody's hand who's about to shoot somebody. Then coercion, yeah.
Of course.
You know what
I
I'm
think you'd have to
saying?
say, I mean, I think everybody would say safety and survival of everyone.
Sure.
Yeah.
To add a question to that, Nancy, or to everyone is, or when is coercion the perception? And I mean, coercion is a matter of perception within both the receiver and is coercion for one, not coercion for the other?
Good point.
We
Well,
add that
you agree
component,
with
and then it can really muddy the.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is coercion again a part of that individual or group situation that people talk about, so that we can begin to learn the impact of one's words or actions and understand. And that's another way to understand a perception of coercion that I may not have realized.
Or is it, do we go back to perhaps definitionally
Yeah.
that where is the critical attributes for coercion versus
Yeah.
persuasion?
Yeah.
So if we go back, are there some people who are going to perceive you're persuading me,
Yeah.
but you're not in my quality world. I don't trust you anyway. So your persuasion is viewed as coercion.
Yeah.
This isn't going to add quality to my life. It's going to add quality to your life.
Yeah.
Through all of the political stuff that's going on, it's real
Yeah.
interesting because I remember I worked for a man who he would say to me, just trust the system, Sue. Just trust the system. I promise you it'll work. And I remember I would always look at him and go, the system works for you. The system is not working so hot for me. So I don't want to trust the system.
Yeah.
I don't trust the system. And it was real interesting, but it was really, he viewed it as, here, it's persuasive. The system's here to help all of us. It's like, not so much here, hon.
Right.
So maybe it is definitional in sense or perception. I don't know.
I'm
We're
going
going over our time limit.
I'm going to stop the recording here because we've gone way over our time for the recording, but we can certainly continue this discussion if people want to hang around for a little bit. But thank you, Jerry, for the suggestion for the topic, and thanks to everyone who's been chiming in with their opinions. This is I've been enjoying this discussion, and thanks to my co-host Mona for being amenable to changing our way we're running the show a little bit today. But we will be back next week for another edition of Brief the Week. And so I'm signing off for those of you who are watching the reruns, but for the rest of you, just hang on. All right. Thank you. We'll see you next week.